everybody, and welcome to season 8 of the Lions Grid. Jeffrey, we've been away. It's been obviously we wrapped up the season with a Chiefs Super Bowl victory, and now we find ourselves here in the new 2024 NFL season. Of course, free agency has already been a thing, so we'll be covering some of the key additions that we've seen here for the Detroit Lions to start off the season. But of course, just this past, kind of weekend, end of the week here, Detroit played host to the NFL draft. And we set a record there, I believe, over 775,000 people in attendance over the course of the 3 days, shattering the record set back in Nashville in 2019.
Heck yeah, we know how to throw a party.
I think one of my favorite parts, and of course, it's well documented that I used to be a Packers fan, and that there's still a certain love for the Packers I have, but I will admit I did enjoy seeing the Packers thoroughly booed at every opportunity
That was pretty
this
great.
past weekend. And it's interesting because, of course, next year's draft is going to be at Lambeau, so we'll have to see if Packers fans return the favor because Lions fans definitely were not making the Packers feel welcome at the venue.
Yeah, it was cool. It was good, just good to see the turnout and the that whole thing with that video and the dude clowning that guy and that went viral. That it was just hilarious and just I loved everything about it. Makes me miss football. Want to play? Want to see some games?
Well, you can definitely tell that last year had an energizing effect. You know, the Lions, of course, reaching the NFC Championship game for the first time in a very long time, and it you can tell we're still very energized right now, this fan base, and getting a chance to host the NFL draft. I hope it's not going to be too long before we get to host it again. I think Detroit is kind of a nice location for it because they can have it outside there at Campus Martius, and of course, we're not that far away from a lot of the other markets. Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Pennsylvania teams, like we're pretty centralized, so there are a lot of franchises located near, so it makes it easy for other fans to come, and I think that also helped contribute to the record-breaking numbers we saw down there for the draft, because it's just I think it's a good spot for it. So hopefully we'll get to see the Lions and Detroit host future drafts in the not too distant future.
Yeah, plus I think the downtown area with all the teams kind of being around there, the place is really nice, and
Mhm.
especially it's grown quite a bit even from when we were in the horrible days of 0-16 and all that. But just like the atmosphere down there in the downtown area and just kind of the stuff that's going on there, it's really cool, and it's a really nice kind of area. So I agree with you. I think it'll be kind of it could be potentially a nice spot to revisit if they're the NFL.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that will help influence that is the Lions' ability to continue to be towards the upper echelons of the league. And of course, they have taken steps. I think we're both familiar with Dan Campbell and his post game conference when they lost to the 49ers. And he said it was going to be very difficult for the Lions to get back to this position again. But him and Brad Holmes are doing their best to cook us up the rest, to cook us up another NFC North, not only an NFC North championship, but hopefully get us back to that NFC Championship game. And it starts, Jeffrey, with some of these additions we saw in free agency. We'll see this again in the NFL draft, but it seems like the Detroit Lions are willing to leave no stone unturned when it comes to finding talent, because they are definitely keeping an eye on our neighbors to the north when it comes to the Canadian Football League. Their first signee of the free agency was Matthew Betts, an edge rusher from the British Columbia. I can't remember what British Columbia is. I looked that up earlier. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he pans out. But he is the first of two Canadian footballers that we have added to the roster. And it'll be interesting to see if they what they can contribute to the team.
Yeah, I think I'm totally cool that they clearly have their guys in mind, like people who are like Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes as guys, and if they can find them here and like this guy seems like a big man too, and if he wants to play and win, I mean, I think they could scheme him up well. So I think it's great that they're kind of going out in other leagues and taking a look at scouting that way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely we'll talk about them going after their guys here in a little bit when we get to the draft. But I certainly like the fact they are not afraid of bringing guys they think are their own. And speaking, a guy that is Dan Campbell's familiar with back from his time with the Saints, Marcus Davenport coming over from the Vikings. Hopefully, I don't necessarily think him by himself is going to be that complete complement to Aiden Hutchinson, but I think him as part of a rotation certainly could help out and help Hutchinson get some pressure on some opposing quarterbacks, especially with, as we'll see here in the coming slides, all the extensive work that went into reshaping the secondary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have speaking of those secondary additions, the first pick that even I think was first a good sign. This, of course, came before everything happened with Cam Sutton, but Amik Robertson being brought in from the Raiders. I think this was a great pickup for the Lions, and certainly was I think the first step of many, like I mentioned, as the Lions try to address that secondary, which was a bit of a concern for them down the road. What are your thoughts here with Amik Robertson, Jeffrey?
I'm totally cool with it because they are going all cornerback, very cornerback heavy in our additions here, and I think they put together a pretty good room here to kind of like see who can win these jobs as far as like, because I feel like we're almost starting brand new here in the secondary, like figuring out who our main guys are. I know Branch is safe, and but like even Vildor, I mean, he's looking like he might be a cornerback 3 and all the kind of talent we're bringing in. So I'm glad that they're addressing this specifically because it was absolutely our weakest part of our team. Really was the secondary.
Yeah, I think they talked about it a little bit last year, going through that whole process of having to release players and things like that. As you become a more talented team, as you continue to add depth at at the various positions, it becomes really hard because the players you're letting go then are decent players. You're not just letting go bums off that are really not going to contribute. At some point, you really have to start to make some hard decisions. So I know I saw Brad Holmes had a quote too after the draft about how they like all the guys they have in that secondary room, and it is going to be that sort of that battle, that fight, because no positions are going to be given. Everything's going to have to be earned, and certainly I think it's going to be quite interesting to watch that secondary battle. And hopefully, again, I would have loved to see them add a. It's hard because to get a pass rusher that would be equivalent to Aiden Hutchinson would certainly be quite the investment for this team. So I'm hopeful that what they've done with the secondary, these changes, sometimes to help out a secondary, it makes sense to enhance your pass rush because then they don't have to hold coverage for quite as long. But perhaps if we're able to do a better job in coverage, that'll actually give Hutchinson, McNeil, everybody up front a better chance of getting home if they're able to hold that coverage a little bit, a couple seconds longer than they were last season, and just make that pass rush a little more effective because we were doing a great job rushing the quarterback last season. We just weren't doing a good job getting sacks.
Yeah, and it'll help to have like a deeper line rotation to be able to bring pressure constantly, rather than just relying on Ian Hutchinson to beat out the double team that he's on about every snap. But I've loved all these kind of depth additions that are going on here. It's a mark of a good team, definitely.
Absolutely. And then one of the picks that I am absolutely excited about, obviously he is coming off the oblique injury, but I think DJ Reader is very much a Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes guy, somebody that's going to be out there trying to snatch kneecaps. And I know they mentioned that when they brought him in, they didn't want to let him get back on the plane without getting him a deal. So excited to see DJ Reader joining this Detroit Lions front.
Yeah, that is a big man. That is not the only big man we'll talk about, but that is a big man. He's going to be awesome in the run defense, that was probably our strength on defense, is absolutely our run stopping, and we're going to make that even harder this year. And then with the cornerback help there, I think it's looking good. This man's going to need a lot of blocks,
which is good because if you look around the NFC North, Aaron Jones is still there, but of course he is now with the Vikings instead of the Packers. You have DeAndre Swift making a return to the NFC North with the Bears, and then you have Brandon Jacobs joining the Green Bay Packers. So, there are quite a few premier running backs in the NFC North. So, just
Yeah,
from our division games alone, stopping the run is going to be important.
I liked it when the rest of the team sucked and we were good, but now I feel like we are in high contention for the toughest division, at least from off season starting here.
I absolutely agree. I was actually going to talk about that. I think in years past, obviously Lions fans have felt a lot of optimism. After the offseason, we always think that the team is getting better, and then sometimes yes, we actually saw improvements with the team, but a lot of the time something would happen, whether it be an injury or just the team not gelling, and they would just get like pooped on, and the record would reflect that. And that's really what's helped the other teams, Packers, the Vikings, the Bears, really establish those runs of back-to-back NFC North championships. But it seems like this year for the Lions, every team in the NFC North took a step forward, and it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe it's just a case where we're on that other foot now, where it's going to be the other teams who are going to have those things like the injuries that offset them. I mean, obviously last year for the Vikings, losing Kirk Cousins, that sort of derailed their momentum. Who knows how Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy are going to sort of adapt in their first year in the NFL. And then with the Packers, Jordan Love looked pretty good last season, but obviously it's a new year. There's no guarantee. But it just feels like
more passes across the field.
He channels channels his inner Brett Favre and just, I can make any throw out here. Just watch. But excuse me, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, what happens, because it always felt like no matter how good the Lions got in an offseason, the best teams in the division were still able to maintain their dominance. And I definitely think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have made the moves here to keep us, and they've addressed the areas of concern. But it feels like the other teams did a good job too. So I think you're right. This could easily be one of the toughest divisions in the NFL, if not the toughest. And then, of course, when you're building for toughness, you need to make sure those trenches stay good. Of course, we did lose Jonah Jackson to the Rams on a 3-year, $51 million deal, but we did bring in Kevin Zeitler from the Ravens to help with that the inside there at the guard position. So, I think Jonah Jackson, the upside there being that he's definitely younger and sort of earlier on the other side of his career. Kevin Zeitler is obviously, he's a good player. He's coming off. I'm not sure if he was in the Pro Bowl last season, but he was a Pro Bowler very recently. But he is sort of, he's an older gentleman, but he definitely helps us stay in should help us stay in our winning ways. But between the two of them, if money wasn't an option, and he asked me which one I would want Jonah Jackson, just because, again, younger, more years ahead of him. But I do think Kevin Zeitler will do a good job coming in here and helping anchor what hopefully will again be one of, if not the best, or one of the best offensive lines in the NFL this season.
Yeah, I think I would love Jonah Jackson, but I think with how well our line plays and the kind of schemes we can do in the running game, I mean, we have a pretty good offensive line coach in kind of coordinating this group to be able to do this kind of thing week in, week out. So it hurts losing young talent, but I feel like someone could come in as skilled as Zeitler, and he would he would fit right in, and I feel like our coaching staff would know how to use him.
Absolutely. And of course, not featured in this is also we did re-sign Graham Glasgow as well. So we have Glasgow and Zeitler will be our starting guards. And then in one of the trades made, our main trade made this offseason, minus the ones done during the draft, we were able to get Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, addressing that secondary, adding a corner there. And, of course, this was done before, just like the Meek Robertson pickup was done prior to everything that happened with Cam Sutton. Of course, he was released after domestic battery allegations. And, I that whole situation, Jeffrey, was kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was
The fact that he seemed to be like avoiding police for like 2 weeks. Never good whenever it's something involving domestic violence or anything like that. But I am kind of glad that he was able to turn himself in and wasn't. There were some people out there who were suggesting that perhaps he had expired and had had died or something like that. So I'm glad that not happy of the crimes he's accused of, but certainly happy that he didn't end up either being killed or taking his own life or anything like that. But yeah, crazy stuff there.
Yeah, and you know what? Well, for the in the football angle, he was out there getting cooked every week anyway.
He was.
I was okay with it, with them cutting ties with him anyway. But this just
I was feeling kind of good, bringing Amik Robertson and Carlton Davidson. I thought maybe those two guys could take on the main 1-2 slot, and then he could split time with Brian Branch as the nickel and be able to do something that he's definitely. Cam Sutton, when he was with the Steelers, definitely thrived in zone and playing in that nickel position. He wasn't necessarily, meant for going up against the other team's number one and trying to shut them down. That just was sort of the position he had to play last season for the Lions. And as you mentioned, just because you find yourself in the kitchen doesn't mean, well, he was getting cooked instead of doing the cooking, which was unfortunate. So. But yeah, Carlton Davis, I like this guy a lot. I was kind of surprised that Tampa Bay sort of let him go. And, the other guy who was kind of on my radar was the Denver Broncos, Pat Surtain. That was a guy that had Patrick Surtain Jr. Was a guy that kept coming up as a potential trade target for the Lions, but I actually kind of like Carlton Davis a little better because I think he matches his production quite closely, but I don't think it would have cost us more, I think, to bring in Patrick Surtain Jr. than it did with Carlton Davis. So it was that kind of right balance of productivity and cost there, and I think it should be a pretty nice partnership there between Davis and the Lions.
Yeah, I think Pat Surtain would have definitely. Hello, Cat.
Deku's Tails making a guest appearance.
I think the getting Surtain would have cost some more draft capital than we were willing to give up because Surtain he's a very good quarterback, and I think he would get like some high seconds, maybe even a first to get him away from Denver. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this was a good value proposition.
And of course, though, I've seen some of the ratings for the Denver Broncos, and they did not get a very high draft grade. So giving Sean Payton and them additional draft picks maybe wouldn't hurt too bad because they did seem to struggle there. Of course, they kind of got their hands forced with taking Bo Nix a little earlier than I think they wanted to. But we'll talk about the draft in just a second. Of course, two big pieces of news that broke for the Lions before the draft was the extension of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell. So two big players lined up, two of those young core members. I was expecting a third domino to fall once I saw Amon-Ra St. Brown, I saw Penei Sewell. I was kind of expecting to see Jared Goff also an extension announced. The fact that we haven't seen one, I'm not sure what to think too much about that because I know they love Jared Goff. Obviously that was made clear from everything that happened when we played the Rams and we beat them. That sort of post-game locker room was, I think, more about Jared Goff getting vindication against his former team than it was the Lions beating Matt Stafford. And so the fact that they really have rallied around Jared Goff and he seems to be a, really critical member of this team and the culture here, it's kind of surprising that they haven't locked him up. What are your thoughts there, Jeffrey, about him being one of the three not to get extended?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting situation because are you kind of hedging your bets? Because we love Jared Goff, don't get me wrong. I love that Goff-fence and the way it's rolling right now. But can he be this good and give the kind of production they want for like the next 2-3 years kind of thing? Or are they going to be like, well, let's take a shot? Because I although I think Brad Holmes is he likes his guys and everything like that. I think he also be prudent in making a decision for the football team kind of thing. Like if they see some cards moving around and there's a decent quarterback that could be an upgrade to Jared Goff, I think they're going to kind of keep that open. But I do agree with you. It's very interesting that we've not kind of heard any smoke on that kind of front.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. Maybe they're in talks and it just hasn't been finalized yet. We'll have to keep an eye out up in there, but certainly interesting. And of course, it'll also be interesting to see what Hendon Hooker can do this year. Obviously last year he was coming off the injury. He did end up making the active roster at towards the end of the season, but this will be his first real year as the Lions' backup quarterback. Hopefully we won't be seeing too much of him because Jared Goff will be healthy and playing well. But with the preseason and the practice and stuff like that, it'll be interesting to see what people say about him and how he's developed from his time with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to the I think the Penei Sewell extension is the highlight of that. Like, I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, but having this good of an offensive lineman is it's critical, and the things we can do with just having him on there, just it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, he is definitely, anytime teams talk about building a franchise, a lot of teams like to take that build from the trenches position, and he is certainly that guy, one of those tackles that you can build around as a cornerstone of that. So it's fantastic they're able to get him lined up, and hopefully, as we talk about, we've talked about that our offensive line coach doing a great job of helping them develop and put them in schemes and stuff. There's a couple of linemen here we took in the draft that may, hopefully we'll be able to see something similar with here. But as we transition now into taking a look at the draft picks, Jeffrey, we start with our first round pick here. The Lions did trade up to go ahead and take Terrion Arnold with the 24th pick in the first round. But definitely, again, addressing that position of need, bringing in a corner. And of course, by this time, everything had already happened with Cam Sutton. He had already been released from the team. And so the Lions seem to come into this draft with a plan. And as you can tell by their first and second picks, that plan was to address that secondary, specifically the corner position. Enos Rakestraw Jr., the second pick, the 61st overall. What are your thoughts there about the Lions going with their first and second picks corner, first with Terrion Arnold, and then second with Enos Rakestraw?
Terrion Arnold, absolutely love it. Didn't think he would be there, but this was a historic draft on the offensive drafting pick front.
Yep.
But having him is an awesome value, and I'm totally okay with them going ham on the cornerbacks because like we saw, it was the glaring weakness on our team, and we are doing absolutely everything we can to, one, get talent in the building now with our free agent signings, and then two, taking some chances on some of these young guys.
Absolutely. And I think, in sort of retrospect, it seemed like there was a chance because, as you mentioned, it was sort of that historic draft where there were so many offensive players taken off the board. And it seemed like there could potentially be a run on corners sort of brewing there towards the end of the first round. It did end up actually not happening until a little later in the second round. But the fact that the Lions moved up to take Terrion Arnold, the guy they wanted, and sort of being, again, from with hindsight in mind, maybe they didn't need to trade their third round pick, and Terrion Arnold might have fallen to where they were at in the first round anyways. But I definitely don't blame Brad Holmes for coming up here and getting the guy he wanted. The fact that he was available there at 24, doing what he needed to secure that pick. Now Andy's coming to say hello. It's Kitty Palooza over here at the Lions grid. Yeah, I definitely like the Terrion Arnold pick. I would say the only thing that concerns me about both of these guys, and it's not so much of a concern, but they're both 5'11". So they're both, they're both fast, they're both strong, but they're both about relatively the same height. And I think I would have liked to have seen, obviously, what's the difference in coverage between someone who's 5'11" and 6'1", if they have the athleticism and everything like that. I don't know, but I almost would have liked guys with two different body types, I guess, would have been sort of my preference just because, I mean, you're not seeing as many big wide receivers as you used to. But there still are some teams out there, and of course, the Bears. One of their draft picks was for uh, Rome. Why am I freaking
A
Adunze?
doomsday.
Adunze. There we go. Adunze and Rome Adunze, and he's a tall guy.
Hmm.
And so, having a corner that can match up with him may be tricky at 5'11. I don't know. I don't play the position. I know it's very difficult, but that's just a slight concern on my part. Is just that they're both 5'11. It would have been, it would have been cool if maybe one was a little bit taller, but I know as far as what I've seen from a lot of the draft recaps and things like that. I think Terrion Arnold is expected to be kind of a starter from day one, whereas Rick Straw is kind of. They think that he'll definitely be contributing this season, but I think they expect him to take a little bit longer to get polished into being a everyday starter in the NFL, which is perfectly fine with me. I don't mind that. Taking a guy that can have that immediate impact and then having that guy that maybe by the end of the season is sort of stepping up and providing a spark. Sounds good to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Given the amount of quarterbacks we now have on the roster, we have depth, so we don't necessarily have to be like, well, you're starting because three people are injured ahead of you.
Yeah, that'll be another key too, is the injury bug. Our secondary was rather beat up last year, so people did have to sort of step up and play. So hopefully we will see a much healthier secondary, and they will get the time they need to sort of develop. Because yeah, that was an issue last year. Then our first offensive pick here, and of course, this is our second pick from the Canadian Football League. Uh, it says Marcus Davenport here. I have the wrong name there. I apologize. I forgot to update that. But
Giovanni Manu.
Yep, Giovanni Manu. I was just checking to see he's what 6'8", 300 and is it
350.
350. Big man, Jeffrey.
Yes, he ran a 4.9640. So he's also a big, fast man.
Yeah, and he used to play basketball. Is my understanding. Was earned the nickname Baby Shaq.
Yes.
So he
always good to have that kind of name.
He's a big, athletic man. Obviously, playing in the Canadian Football League. It's hard to say if it is just NFL bias, but I think the knock against him has been that he hasn't been playing against the highest level of competition. But certainly a chance here where a guy with all the physical tools coming into a coaching staff that you mentioned, Jeffrey, excels at developing offensive linemen, could be a pretty spicy pick for us. And of course, as our, as we try to continue to exert our dominance in the NFC North, having offensive linemen that can come in, step in, and make a difference is going to be big because, as good as our offensive line was last year, I want to say that the starting five, they definitely did not start a majority of the game where we saw all five of our starters out there.
I think we had like 10 or 15 iterations just by week 3.
So yeah, if they can develop him and get him to be a contributor, it will be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then taking a look here at now, this player is pretty interesting. I should mention that with both Giovanni Manu and with Sion Vaki here, both these 4th-round picks, the Lions did not have 4th-round picks. They traded up to get in here. And Brad Holmes, I saw a quote that said he was originally prepared to not draft at all in the 4th round. And rumor, the story goes the legend goes that both he and Dan Campbell came in the next morning and said they had a bad feeling about not drafting in the 4th round. And there were 2 players that both of them felt bad about potentially missing out on. And those 2 players were, for both of them, Giovanni Manu and Sion Vaki here, the safety from Utah. So that's why they decided ultimately to trade up, because they were just mind melding in sleep.
Look, their chakras have aligned.
and
The city
felt
of
they just
Detroit's
need.
behind them. They've got the voodoo going on. We just can't have any moon phases around us that are messing up the magic.
Yeah, so they channeled that magic, and that led us to trading up here. And I think the interesting thing here too with Vaki is that he also played a little bit of running back as well for
Yeah.
UConn. So he is a highly athletic player. It'll be
Yeah, especially
interesting.
with the kickoff changes that they're trying this year, I feel like we're going to see a lot of creative um, kickoff formations that are legal and trying things, and I think we're going to see an uptick in some returns. So I think people like this are super valuable, especially this year. People who are good special teamers and just deep depth. I think if you can get a guy with good vision and take advantage of the kickoff rules, I mean that's all the better.
Absolutely. And then getting value in the sixth round. This pick here is one that a lot of people are giving the Lions quite a bit of credit for. Makai Wingo, selecting him in the sixth round with pick number 189. Uh, the Lions taking the defensive tackle out of LSU.
Yeah,
Now,
another big man.
another big man known for his run stuffing ability. So between him, DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil, of course, it'll be nice to see hopefully some development out of Broderick Martin too this season. The Lions' third round pick last year, who really felt like the only Lions draft pick last year that didn't contribute in any sort of significant way. Hopefully, we'll see a little bit more of him this year, and uh, yeah, it looks like it's going to be tough running in between the guards against these Lions.
Yeah, especially these young defensive tackles that can have DJ Reader in front of them as understudies. I think it's a good pairing there for the development.
Absolutely, and I kind of like if you're gonna try and find value in the sixth round, taking a guy from a defensive minded SEC school is certainly I think a good gamble, a good prospect to try and see if you can't turn them into a contributor. And then last but not least, we had he played guard mostly at Boston College, but he is listed as an interior offensive lineman. Christian Mahogany. He smells of rich mahogany and bourbon, Jeffrey. Uh, he was our second, sixth round pick 210. Again, adding some depth there in the interior of this Detroit Lions offensive line. So they definitely focused heavily on that secondary with the cornerback position in particular. But what are your thoughts overall about the Lions draft class here for 2024?
I love it. I could be drinking the Kool-Aid pretty hard, but I think that paired with all the free agency signings and the trade to get Carlton Davis, just like identifying needs that we need and attacking those, not going for necessarily sometimes the sexiest pick, but the ones that kind of give us the best chance for like long-term success.
Absolutely. I think if the only thing that I think is sort of missing that they didn't get so far this offseason would be another wide receiver. Obviously, they did re-sign Donovan Peoples-Jones, and he didn't really have a whole lot of time to contribute to the Lions last season. But they did lose Josh Reynolds, who did have a pretty good connection with Jared Goff. Losing him, I still kind of feel like they could use a number 3 guy because I'm hoping Jamison Williams is going to really step up and be the number 2 guy. But they almost needed like their own big body wide receiver because obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's pretty good wherever you put him on the field, amazing in the slot. Jamison Williams, you have to keep an eye on him, otherwise he is going to find an opening. And as long as Jared Goff can throw it far enough, if he can get it down there,
Yes.
he's they're in good shape. But it does almost seem like they're kind of missing that Keon Coleman was drafted by the Buffalo Bills, that guy that can jump up there and get those 50-50 balls. They're kind of sort of missing that sort of archetype at the wide receiver spot.
I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is supposed to be that, but like you said, he didn't get much. He didn't see the field too much. But I know he was a mid-season acquisition, and they are very much about you have to earn reps and stuff. But he, apparently he's a fairly decent downfield blocker. He's willing to block, which all these guys are. I think they definitely go for the guys who are willing to throw down out there in the open field. So I think we could see more of Donovan Peoples-Jones kind of fulfilling that role for you, because he is also a big physical guy, and he was pretty decent at catching contested balls and when he was playing at in Cleveland. But you're right. We haven't been able to see that yet, so the jury's still out.
Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, that's not even like a huge concern for me. It's just like it would be nice to have just another guy, and hopefully we'll see Brock Wright take a step forward too. You know, obviously the Lions went ahead and matched the San Francisco 49ers offer to him to keep him here. But you know, he always feels like a player that's really on that sort of like he's almost ready to like take it to the next level. And obviously, Sam Laporta came in his rookie year and just smashed it. So then, you know, but having a good complement to him, having a second tight end that, you know, is a viable option, especially if Sam Laporta does, you know, get hurt. Hopefully, we'll see him step up because that would be great. Again, I really just think they just need that other option, whether it be that wide receiver or a second tight end. Somebody just needs to, you know, again, especially with Josh Reynolds being gone. I think there's going to need to be somebody that steps up to be that sort of escape valve / comfort guy that, you know, when the preferred options are covered, that he can sort of rely on to find some scrappy way to get open. So, you know, again, nothing that I think is going to sink the season or anything like that, but just was one thing that I was like, if I could have all the things, if I could be extremely greedy, that would be one of the things I wanted. And then, you know, it'll be interesting to see how Marcus Davenport again can contribute and what sort of, you know, what sort of pass rush we can generate outside of Aiden Hutchinson, because he obviously did a great job last season. Alan McNeil, I think, was good. You know, it'll be interesting to see what James Houston does for us this season as part of that rotation. But I think that we do, you know, again, maybe that answer is just our secondary is going to be so much better that it enables them to get more pressure on the QB or just gives them a chance to get that pressure that's getting there to actually get to the quarterback. But the pass rush and the wide receiver, I think, are really the only two areas that I'm a little shaky on. And then my number one request, which they're still going to have time to do, is at the end of the UFL, when the Michigan Panthers are done playing, if they do not sign Bates as their kicker after kicking two 60-plus yard field goals at Ford Field, they're crazy. You sign that. You don't let that man leave after the last Michigan Panthers game. Right. You sign him and make him alive.
Brad Holmes better be waiting in the locker room at the end of the game, being like, "I got your contract here."
I hope he's already shown. Well, I don't know. It might be tampering. I don't know what the rules are with the UFL players.
I'm sure they have a legal tampering period of some kind.
There better have be an unofficial handshake that has already happened that says, "Okay, as soon as you're done, pack up your locker stuff and just walk over to the Lions locker room." I mean, it's impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm okay with our kicker situation now, but that kind of prospect, you don't let that kind of thing go.
Yeah, Badgley has done certainly a decent job and his you know, look good, but Bates has been fantastic. And just, you know, anytime you have a young kicker come into your home field and kick not only one but two record-breaking field goals, you know, you just got to bring that guy in. It's just how it is. So, you know, that's my thoughts on it. But, you know,
it would erase the pain of Justin Tucker upon us to get somebody like that.
Justin Tucker. All right. Well, Jeffrey, any final thoughts before we sign off after today's episode?
I guess my biggest, if I were to say winners and losers, I would give my winners to, unfortunately, the Chicago Bears. I think they're setting up Caleb Williams to be at least starting out with plenty of the weapons that Justin Fields didn't have. So that scares me a little bit, but I would consider them winners. Biggest loser, I would think, is Atlanta. I mean, bringing in Kirk Cousins. Yeah, bringing in Kirk Cousins, going kind of opening they say they're going all in. This is their window here, but then getting an older projecty quarterback after playing or paying Kirk Cousins that kind of money, like why not get somebody for Kirk Cousins? Your defense sucks. Why not get, like, just doesn't make sense to me. It feels like they don't know what they're doing. Arthur Blank had to walk in there and get explained. So I say they're my biggest losers for sure.
You're not alone in that sentiment. I know, looking over a lot of the draft grades and things like that, the Falcons are usually the lowest rated team in the league, and a lot of that is the Penix trade. To your point, being in a win now mode when you already have a established quarterback that you just paid $180 million to, who's set to start for the next 4 years, which would make your new rookie quarterback 27 years old by the time he gets on the field. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I understand wanting to have a solid backup, but is every other position so well staffed that you can spend your first round pick on making sure you have a solid backup quarterback? And the answer for the Falcons in that question is no. Now, ultimately, because they are in the NFC South, I don't know if it's going to hurt them that badly just because of how bad the NFC South is.
That's so true.
But like for other teams, like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all. And part of me thought maybe they were like trying to like trade with somebody else, and they like were like being hesitant to trade. And they're like, fine, we'll take them, and then you'll cost you more later. But I don't know what the end game is there. They seem to be. I thought a great place for Penix would be someplace like Seattle, where maybe he could sit a season or two at most behind Geno Smith, and then get to play with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Smith Njigba. I mean, that seems like that would be a really easy place for him to plug in and have similar wide receiver talent to what he had at Washington. But it's interesting. I do like your Bears pick for the winners, but I also think I like the Cardinals. Surprisingly, they had a ton of draft capital, and they seem to really go out there and really get a bunch of players and are using the draft to rebuild. It'll be interesting to see how Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. What sort of success they're able to have. And then I think for my loser, obviously I would definitely go with the Falcons as well. But just to add a little spice, a little variety, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. I don't know what possessed them to trade with Kansas City. Of all teams, you're helping Kansas City get their new Tyreek Hill. They're the team that stops you from going to the Super Bowl every year in the AFC, and you trade with them? Crazy. And madness just doesn't make any sense. That's worse than trading to a division rival right there. And I don't understand. I know, obviously they ended up taking Keon Coleman with their pick. And Xavier Worthy compared to Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy is that sort of smaller, faster receiver. So I understand them not necessarily wanting him because they had, after all they've done, letting go Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. I think the tallest wide receiver they had on their team post the purge was 5'11" with like Mark Hollis. So I understand why they wanted to go for a taller wide receiver, but why you would also then let a talented short receiver go to your AFC nemesis, I don't understand.
That also baffled me, especially because you're losing a lot of production. Even though Diggs kind of disappeared a bit at the end of the year, you're losing a lot of production out of those two leaving, and I don't understand.
Head scratcher. I don't get it. They must be smarter than I am because
it's above our pay grades for sure.
And we talked about it, Jeffrey, and you sort of mentioned too, with the Bears being your winner there for the best draft pick. The NFC North is going to be a very tough division, I think, this upcoming year. And I think what's interesting is you look at Caleb Williams and then you look at J.J. McCarthy. These are two rookie quarterbacks that are stepping into really good situations. For the Bears, I think obviously their offensive line is probably going to be their weakest part of that offense. They have invested in free agency in addressing that, but they, was not a focus during the draft for them. But they have gotten him plenty of playmakers at the skill positions. And then, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones. I know TJ Hawkinson is coming off the ACL injury, but the Vikings offense is also pretty stacked with talent. I think there's going to be, of all the QBs selected in the first round, and there were 6 of them, I think both Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy are going to be 2 QBs that are going to be evaluated a little bit harder than their counterparts just because of the quality of teams they're stepping into and the talent around them. I think the expectations should be rightfully a little bit higher for them. But that's just going to add, I think, to the competitive nature of this NFC North because, usually you can expect a rookie QB to maybe struggle their first year, but I don't think either the Vikings or the Bears are anticipating that to be what you're going to see on the field. So it's going to be real.
As a Lions fan, I hope they all suck, but
oh yeah,
but I hope they flame out real hard and they're busts. But we'll see what happens when the season rolls around.
I hope JJ McCarthy gets real used to seeing Aiden Hutchinson. I hope they get very familiar with each other once again.
Yes.
And I hope he hits just the stankiest of stanky legs on him after the sack, just to let him know that we are no longer both Wolverines.
Yes.
That would definitely put a smile on my face. And then, of course, there's also those damn Packers who, still they reached a little bit on their first round pick, but everything else was pretty solid. So
it's a tough division. I think we can compete with the AFC North and being what is it about these North teams?
I don't know. We just like to be in like a dead heat all the time. If we could maybe trade place with one of the NFC East teams,
right,
that'd be great. I'm not scared of either the Cowboys or the Eagles.
I think speaking of the Cowboys and Eagles in that division, I think the Commanders had a good draft too.
They did, yeah.
Trying to set Jaden Daniels up pretty well, but new regime. That's kind of like a whole reset for that whole kind of franchise. So we'll kind of be interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, it's also weird with Jaden Daniels, that whole paradigm because of COVID about him throwing a touchdown pass to guys that are already in the NFL.
Yeah.
So it's I think of the QBs taken in the first round, the 2 that I expect to do the worst are probably Drake May with the Patriots and then Bo Nix with the Broncos. Those 2, I think I have the lowest upside for them. Drake May, just because he's another one of those like Duke QBs, Danny Dimes type thing, where everyone like, oh, we love him, and then I don't know if I just don't see it. It's Duke. Or is he from North Carolina? I think he's from North Carolina, but it's, Mitch Trubisky. Like they for some reason, it seems like every year people fall in love with somebody like that. Maybe a Will Levis from last year, if you will, where they just like rise up the draft board, and it's like,
hey, don't slander Will Levis. He is the most senior quarterback in the AFC South now.
Him and CJ Stroud are tied. They're both.
I think CJ Stroud is like months younger.
Oh, fair. Okay.
He's the veteran out there, the Mayo Man himself.
Just a wildly old vet. I like it. Well, it'll definitely be interesting to see what unfolds later on this season, Jeffrey. I'm sure we will be back. If any, I imagine news is probably going to sort of simmer down now as teams start OTAs
OTAs and training camps start picking up, and unless more people like evade the law, that kind of stuff. But
getting car accidents and
just being bad human beings despite all the resources you have.
Yep.
Man, shame on you people.
Yeah. PSA: if you're under the influence, just call somebody else. There's Uber. The
NFL has their own like Uber program for the players themselves.
There's no reason.
I'm
sure whatever trouble you would get in from that, actually calling them and getting like busted for being high or whatever, cannot be as bad as what would happen if you actually get in an accident and hurt yourself or somebody else. So just be smart, and be kind to everybody out there.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, Jeffrey, we will be back with more episodes here in season 8 of the Lions Grid. But until the next episode, everybody, I'm Kevin Marhine. He's Jeffrey Raymond. We'll catch you during the next episode. Thanks for staying with us this evening, and bye-bye.
Bye.